So as I told you guys last week, we're going to talk about Jaylen Palmer, and they made me say it all over again. But
Jacob's riled up from his nap.
Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of Mets Prospective presented by Verizon. Jacob Resnick back once again with Joe DeMayo. And Joe, it's our first show since the trade deadline. There was a lot of questions leading up to the July 30th deadline about who the Mets might acquire and what the cost would be. And it turns out the one big move was bringing in Javier Baez from the Chicago Cubs. And the cost obviously pretty high, in Pete Crow-Armstrong, the Mets' first-round pick, just 1 year ago. So, Joe, what was your first reaction when you heard that Pete Crow-Armstrong would be headed to the Chicago Cubs?
I was a little surprised, given that they were trading for a rental piece in Javier Baez. But this trade deadline, it did appear as if rentals actually net more than they had in years past. I'm not exactly sure the reason why. We've talked about the depth in the Mets system, and sort of lacking there required you to give up a better prospect. A guy like Pete Crow-Armstrong, guy that I think has Gold Glove potential in center field. There's some questions about his bat. He's a guy that you had to give to get, and the Mets really wanted to make a push to try to be a playoff team this year. And getting a guy like Javier Baez obviously has the opportunity to help them throughout the stretch run.
You mentioned it. We've talked about it. The depth in the system has, not been what most Mets fans have hoped. As they've kind of tried to develop the farm system over the last couple of years. It's been very top heavy without that kind of middle ground of solid prospects, not elite prospects that usually you prefer to trade from. The Mets don't really have much of that middle ground. So like you said, you end up losing a player like Pete Crow-Armstrong. And just look at a year ago, the 2020 draft class, it was only 5 rounds. The Mets had 6 picks. Only 2 players are remaining in the organization in just about a year, JT Ginn and Eric Orzi, 2 pretty solid pitchers. But there's a lot of churn through this system, and I think it's kind of not ideal for the organization as they're trying to stockpile assets and build it up over a couple of years. Give us your updated top 10 and the outlook of the top of the Mets system now.
Just a couple notable changes that I'd like to mention is Brett Baty moves up to being the number 2 prospect in the system. He's really starting to turn it on at AA Binghamton, which is really what I expected. When he got called up, I figured it would be a tough transition, as it often is, to go from high A to AA, but just a real natural hitter that's figuring it out. And another one I want to give some love to is Tyler McGill getting into the top 10. He's a guy that back when I did my top 20 in the spring, he was a borderline top 20 guy for me. But obviously, as you could see, how he's contributing to the big league team. I think we underestimated McGill a bit coming into the spring, and to me, he's a no question top 10 prospect in the system.
Yeah, our top 5 or so looks about the same. Kind of getting towards the back of the top 10, I think it's important to highlight guys like Alex Ramirez and Khalil Lee, who are kind of at different stages in their development. Lee's kind of at the doorstep of the major leagues. We did see him earlier in the year, but he's been playing a lot in AAA, and he's had his ups and his downs, but certainly some trends that you'd like to see. Alex Ramirez, tools, hits the ball hard, plays a really good center field. He's fast, and you'd hope as he continues to grow, his contact skills and on base will improve as well. Joe, last week in our Stock Watch segment, we touched on 20-year-old shortstop Ronny Mauricio. We both have him at the top of our top 10 lists, and he's been on a tear as of late in high A Brooklyn after getting off to a little bit of a slow start. When you look at the major league level with Francisco Lindor locked up long term, potentially Javier Baez, if they're able to re-sign him, could be on the team for years to come. So what do you see as kind of Mauricio's outlook over the next few years as he continues his development?
Well, from a defensive standpoint, I think it works out if they do indeed sign Javier Baez long term. You're looking at a double play combination of Francisco Lindor and Javier Baez up the middle, which would leave third base as the opening, where I think that's probably where Ronny Mauricio best projects long term. I mean, he's only played shortstop, but that's kind of where I project him, which will lead to an interesting discussion. Brett Baty, third baseman. Mark Vientos, third baseman. It would lead to an interesting debate as to how these prospects are really going to pan out for the Mets going forward. But I've always been of the belief that you can never have too much talent, and you'll figure out where to play them physically. Mauricio has matured a lot since the last time we saw him. He really is growing into his big 6'4" frame. The power's coming along with it. He's not striking out as much. He still needs some work on his pitch recognition skills. He's not drawing enough walks for my liking, but this is clearly a big-time talent that has all-star potential if he's able to really put everything together.
And I think it's important just recognizing that he's still only 20 years old. He'll be 21 for all of next season. And just kind of focusing on the development process is important for him, just from a raw talent standpoint. And the power has been a huge improvement this year. He came into the season with only 7 home runs in his career and already has 15. That's actually a Brooklyn Cyclones record now that they're a full season affiliate. It's kind of what you like to see from him. And they're working with him. He's working very closely with the coaches over there in Brooklyn. And I think couple years down the line, when he puts everything together, you're looking at a potential everyday starting above average shortstop in the major leagues. This week's guest is Brooklyn Cyclones bench coach Mariano Duncan. Duncan spent 12 years in the major leagues and is currently in his 3rd season with the organization and first with the Cyclones.
It's something about Mauricio. I know Mauricio for the last 3 years. Last year in the Instructional League, our ex-fan director, Javier Baez, he wanted me to take an ownership in Mauricio because that guy is so young with so much talent. And also the good thing about Mauricio is he's from my hometown. I know him very well. He's from San Pedro. And I got a lot of opportunity, the coach Mauricio and try to go there and be a good friend with him. And let me tell you something about that kid. In 38 years that I'm in baseball, I never seen anybody with so much talent in that position of the Ronny Mauricio. I'm really happy for him the way he developed himself and with chance to be a superstar in the major league level.
What has the development been like on a day-to-day basis? Kind of where is he now compared to where he once was?
When we talk in the spring training, he explained to me, he said, Mariano, my goal is try to be a major league player. But he said it's something that I just tried to learn this year that I don't do in the previous year. He said, I want to learn how to separate my defense from my offense. And that's something that I'm so happy and I'm so satisfied the way he played against so far this year. Even though they maybe see his batting average, in 240, but it's a 240 solid. Because, to me, that guy, every time when that guy make contact, I'm afraid he want to hurt somebody one day in the infield because he hit the ball really hard. I try to teach him how to play the game in every way, defensively, offensively, and base running wise, and game preparation. And so far, they pay off because to me, I think, he's ready to play in the next level right now. There's no doubt in my mind that he can play shortstop in the major league level. Even though that we have Lindor in there for 12 years, but you never know another position that can be open in the future. But right now, I leave him in shortstop. There's no doubt in my mind that he can play that position.
What have you seen from him offensively as far as growth goes just within this season?
He started to understand himself. Sometimes he used to come to the plate and he think he can go there and swing every pitch, like he can cover every pitch, low, high, in and out. And he's starting to understand that he got to be a little bit more patient after play. They try to connect, the pitch that he's looking for.
It's time for our Stock Watch segment where we focus on some players who have gone up or down recently. Joe, why don't you kick us off?
I'm going to focus on left-handed pitcher Josh Walker. He was the Mets' 37th round selection in the 2017 MLB draft out of the University of New Haven in Connecticut. Walker started his season in High A Brooklyn as just an older arm in High A, a guy that I wasn't really considering for my top 20. He's now in AAA Syracuse and now is inside of my top 20 prospects. He's a guy that I think probably profiles more as a number 5 starter or a long reliever, but it's, a fastball. It's not overly impressive stuff. It's a fastball. It's going to be 88 to 92, a pretty solid curveball, pretty decent changeup, but he's a control pitchability guy. And certainly, given his recent success in AAA, if the Mets were to need another starting pitcher over the next couple months, Josh Walker could be a guy that potentially gets a look.
Yeah, and a great story as well. He was supposed to start 2019 in High A St. Lucie, got into a car accident at the beginning of the season, ended up missing all of 2019. Obviously, season canceled in 2020. So he basically missed 2 full years. And The Mets have kind of talked about how they didn't really know where to place a lot of guys to start this season just because of how crazy everything has been. And Walker has absolutely soared through the system. And between him and Tyler and McGill, definitely the two most impressive starting pitchers the Mets have had this year in the minors. For my stock watch this week, I'm going to talk about Jaylen Palmer. And he was a local kid, grew up in Brooklyn and went to high school in Flushing. And the Mets took him in the 22nd round back in 2018. And he was a trendy sleeper pick coming into this year as a young infielder who's shown a lot of power, a lot of promise, tools, but really been extremely prone to striking out. Mets have gotten him some experience playing the outfield, some other infield positions, and so the versatility coming into 2021 has been kind of an interesting thing to keep track of with Palmer. Started off really slow with low A St. Lucie, but he was as hot as they come in July, hitting .319. He earned the promotion up to high A Brooklyn, and he's hitting the ball at a much better launch angle to help him maximize that power. So there's a lot to like about Palmer, very toolsy, but certainly a long ways away. It's going to be a slow development process with him, but definitely a guy to keep an eye on. Once you get past those top prospects in the top 10 in the system, he's definitely in that next group. That'll do it for us this week. We'll see you next time on Mets Prospective, presented by Verizon.
See the Mets of tomorrow play today. The Brooklyn Cyclones play baseball on the beach all summer long. Visit brooklyncyclones.com/tickets.